Hello, and welcome to another edition of Straight in the Training Ground, the podcast where we share our love for the beautiful game and the people out in their communities doing beautiful things. And we are very honored and delighted to have our special guest with us for this episode, Kelly McKay. She is a former collegiate soccer player. She is a film director. She has an endless list of awards, but I'm going to run through just a few of them. She won the Best Short Documentary at the International Film Festival in Amsterdam, the Best Woman Filmmaker at the LA Independent Film Festival, Best Sound Design winner at the Cannes Short Film Festival. She has produced films for Together, the Alex Morgan Company. She has appeared on CBS Sports, and she has a new short film that's just released today, the day we're recording this interview, sponsored by Salt Athletic, titled What We Carry. She's a very big advocate on women's sports. Kelly, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to talk with us today.
Thank you so much. What a nice intro.
I try to do my best. So we're very honored, like I said, and not only just to have you on the podcast today, but we're also delighted to be able to do it the day of this release, which we'll get into shortly, that was brought to you or sponsored from Salt Athletic. But I also want to remind everybody else, this episode of Straight from the Training Ground is sponsored by Salt Athletic. So make sure you check out the links below to them and check out their great, amazing science that will help keep your kids' soccer cleats and goalkeeper gloves from smelling up your car. Trust me, as a parent and a coach. So make sure you check them out. So Kelly, before we get into your new release today, tell everybody a little bit about your background in soccer.
Thank you so much. I would love to share about my background in soccer, which has been such an integral part of my career as a filmmaker as well. So I started playing club soccer outside of Detroit, Michigan when I was growing up. And then I played at the Savannah College of Art and Design for university, for school. And then from there, I continued to play in the WPSL in Atlanta. And then I ended up moving overseas to Germany, where I played for a club in Germany and then came back to the US. And I'm playing more at a for fun, passion side of the game now, which has been so lovely to reconnect with just what it feels like to go there because I want to go there. But everything in my past has sort of led me to where I am today because of sports being a guiding star.
You've been very high level as a player and very competitive. And then, like you alluded to, it's just kind of fun to just get back out there sometimes and kick the ball around. So tell everybody a little bit about like how and when in your life did you start to become interested in film?
I think from an early age, I became interested in film. I was always playing around with cameras. My family is very creative. My parents are both very creative, always trying. My mom was always really interested in different camera tricks. Like, what would it be like if we made a little clip where you looked like you were jumping out of the window, but it was a dummy that was falling out of the window, and then you end up on the ground. And so I was sort of ignited by this curiosity, figuring out how to do those things. I've since moved away from those kind of camera gags, and now I'm much more interested in this, the stories behind the athletes in the world and the stories that I'm telling. But I've always had this curiosity. And then when I went to the Savannah College of Art and Design to play soccer, it was even more ignited. Like, I felt like it was really a place where every part of me was cultivated and more of me was brought out because I was around so many amazing athletes and so many amazing artists. And then that just continued when I played in the WPSL. So I was able to I was always able to do both film and soccer, which I don't think is maybe the most common. Those two things don't always go together, it seems.
Yeah.
Like you choose theater, you're either a theater kid or you're a jock. You can't possibly be both of those things. And so I think I had the privilege of being able to be both of those at the same time.
Yeah. So again, as we said at the beginning of our interview today, we're really excited. You have a new release coming out today as we speak, sponsored by Salt Athletic. It is called What We Carry. It is from the story of Gina Cartagena. Did I say that correctly?
I would say Yina Cartagena.
Cartagena. I apologize for my Spanish. But it is not necessarily related to soccer. It's a very unique story, but it's very important, and I've watched it. It's great about women's sports in general. So before we get into how you connected with her, just tell everybody a little bit about that as I pull up your website.
Sure. So this story is really important. Ultimate Frisbee is the sport that Gina plays. She's an amazing athlete. She could do anything that she wants to do. She puts in the work, but this story in particular follows, it's just a kind of spotlights the journey that she's been on as an ultimate player, coming from Colombia, and what she went through to get to the place that she is now, and what it actually took from her, like what her personal story is, and then also what her athletic journey has been, and how those two kind of pay off for each other, and what it means for her, and what the stakes are, which in her case, the stakes are much, much higher than the stakes were for me. And I could, I really felt really so joyful and so honored to be able to help her share this with the SALT community and the world, really.
It is an amazing story. And as you know, I talked to you a little bit about off camera. I'm also a parent of 2 daughters, but I've coached girls for, over 20 years, both in high school and club. So I'm also obviously a big advocate for females and women's sports. I don't know a lot about the film side of things though, like you do. So when someone watches a short film, and I think the final cut was around 5 or 6 minutes, is that correct?
Yeah.
What's the timeline for that, like in terms of like from start to finish, when you really started the project until the final cut is done? How much time goes into something that ultimately, ends up being 5 or 6 minutes long?
So the project started at the end of last year. So in December, SALT approached me and told me about Gina and how they wanted to do this story. And I took a few weeks to figure out how we wanted to approach it. And her and I met with a translator, and I recorded her entire story, and I asked her a bunch of questions. I had so many questions. And then from that interview, I wrote the voiceover. We had that translated. I wrote it in English. We had it translated into Spanish, and she read it from a teleprompter. So that whole process from figuring out what the story structure was going to be and how we wanted those visuals to tie in, because I'm not personally somebody as a filmmaker who likes to say something and show the same thing. I like to have a little bit more nuance and interesting choices as much as I possibly can. So it took us since December of 2024 until May 21st, 2025 to have this all together. We shot 3 days, which is it's a big undertaking. It's a huge lift for an athlete like Gina, who's traveling so often and has training and has lifts and has, other things that she has to be doing. So it was really such a massive effort for her as well. So I'm glad to have something so that hopefully is a really good showcase of who she is as an athlete and as a person.
This episode is brought to you by our good friends at SALT Athletic. Make sure you check out the science behind their amazing boot bags and goalkeeper glove bags to keep the stink out. Yeah, I mean, it's very meaningful. I think it's very powerful. And I think it's great to hear you say, I think for anyone that watches this, to hear how much time actually goes into something, when they see the final product. I'm sure the language barrier had to be somewhat difficult, or maybe an additional hurdle for you. I don't know if you're, familiar with that in other films you've done before, but that had to be an extra kind of barrier in terms of timeline, correct?
Yeah, Gina's English is incredible. I think it was more really just a confidence thing.
It's much better than my Spanish.
Oh, absolutely. I ended up memorizing the Spanish script so that I could direct her when she was reading the teleprompter, just to know when to take pauses and kind of when to emphasize certain words just in natural speech. But really, like, it was very reliant on her ability to lean into certain moments and really feel the emotion of the retelling. Like, this is her real truth. This isn't something that is, a narrative film.
Manufactured.
This is something that she's actually gone through and is now having the opportunity to reflect back on. A lot of athletes don't have the opportunity to tell their story in this way. So we really wanted to do it as much justice as we could as the film team. One thing I will say is, when we're shooting these gym sequences and when we're shooting these things on the field, it's rarely the athletes that are sweating, and it's more often the people on the camera that are sweating, because we're having to run around and follow them. And a lot of times the crew is not professional athletes. So it's always really a joy, though.
And they're the ones carrying the camera and all the equipment.
Exactly.
And then how did you coordinate? So when you film something like that with her, did she come to you? Did you meet her somewhere? How do you coordinate that to be in the same spot?
So we location scout prior to anything that we film. So we know exactly what direction the sun is coming up. We know based on that, we know what time we want to be there because, at 2 p.m., the light is much harsher than if you get there at, say, 6 a.m., which is unfortunately way too early to be out doing anything. But those are really important decisions to make as a filmmaker. So we location scouted each place and tried to find the most aesthetically interesting place, but also something that was made sense for all of us as the team and as her as the athlete that wasn't going to exhaust anybody too much getting there because it was shot in the city in Manhattan and it can take a long time to get places there.
Sure. I think that that's why you're the professional, because there's so many things behind the scenes that go into just, filming something. I would just take it on my phone and, try to find a nice filter, that makes it look nice. So that's why you're the pro. Obviously, as a female yourself who grew up playing sports, and just by chance, did you play any other sports growing up besides soccer?
I had a stint as a gymnast, as a figure skater. I tried a lot of different things. I never played ultimate, but
Yeah,
soccer was what stuck with me.
that's good though. I like to hear your background though. Some different sports. So as a female though, growing up playing sports, now in 2025, the U.S. Women's National Team obviously was, integral in the growth of women's sports, not just soccer, but women's sports in our country. But beyond that, there's been Caitlin Clark and the WNBA lately, on top of the growth of the NWSL, and other important female athletes. What's your thoughts on the current state of women's sports in our country right now?
So it's really exciting to be in the women's sports industry right now, I think. I feel every single day there's something new happening and there's some new barrier or new record broken. ESPN has projected that the women's sports industry will make $2.35 billion this year. That's a 25% increase from last year. So it's a time where investors are investing, people are coming to games, people want to see, they want to hear, they want to watch, they want to be part of women's sports. We are just as interesting and as profitable as men's sports. So it feels like we're finally starting to show up with the support that has always been deserved. And I just feel like every single day I'm so excited to be part of the world today.
Well,
How do you feel?
how
What's
do
your
I?
I want to hear your thoughts on this because you're also you're seeing it too. You're kind of like on the ground seeing this.
I am, I would say, at ground level, yes. So for anyone that doesn't know, I'm a high school teacher and a coach, and I also coach club, but I've always coached girls for about 20 years now. And so I think on one hand, I agree with you it's an exciting time for women's sports. I feel like where you said you're starting to get the respect that's deserved, I guess. I feel that same way, but I also kind of feel that they're just scratching the surface. I still feel like there's a long ways to go. I think it is a very exciting time because for a long time it felt like there was the U.S. Women's National Team, right, in soccer, and that was it, kind of, at least in our country. It's like, hey, they did these great things, but now there's basketball. I think college softball, women's softball is on TV now on ESPN and gets a lot more coverage, all the time. Based on probably just streaming services and all those things have increased the last few years for all sports. But the NWSL continues to grow. There's the new USL Super League, for women, which is the top division of women's soccer as well, which is I think 8 teams this year, and I think it's going to double to I think it's going to be like 16 teams next year if I'm correct. So I think that's just kind of how I feel. I still feel like it's hard for me as a coach and as a parent. I also have 2 daughters, so I'm always trying to encourage them, not just my own daughters, but kids that I coach, to watch women's sports, to look up to someone? Because I'm amazed. I don't know about you, but when I coach, I'm always amazed at how many girls I coach that play soccer, but they don't have a favorite soccer team. And I always ask them, I'm trying to encourage them, because I feel like, to me, it's kind of like what you said. You grew up and you got into film, but you got into it because when you were younger, you were always kind of messing around with it. You were looking into it, trying things. And like, I'm, as a coach, I always have the idea or the perspective, how are you going to be good at something if you never watch it, at the highest level? And as a guy, I always did that with my friends and, watch baseball and football and soccer growing up. But I still feel like it's there's a long ways to go for girls to watch women's teams and professional athletes, I guess, and find those role models that they look up to. Maybe it's more of a female trait. I don't know, what your thoughts are on that, but I still have a difficult time getting them to watch women's sports and I guess have that same passion for it.
Yeah, I think that there's a few things at play. I think it's hard first of all, if their parents aren't encouraging that, it makes it difficult. And then streaming and finding those games in the past have been so difficult, especially if it's a more niche sport, like as an example, ultimate or women's wrestling or women's volleyball. Those sports are hard to find. And I mean, the NWSL and a lot of other leagues have now signed streaming deals, so they're easier to find those games, but that's very new. So I remember in the past going through so many hoops to try to figure out how to watch a game, and you have to really have wanted to watch the game in order to watch it. So I think there are some things that are still holding back women's sports, but it is getting better. It is getting easier. It feels like every year, some record is broken in the running world or in basketball. So
or in attendance,
in attendance. Yeah. So it just feels like the floodgates have really opened. We haven't been given a lot of opportunity, and only in the past, really 30 years have we started to see just so much growth happening that I can't imagine where we'll be in 30 years from now. Yeah. So I just feel like it's hard to say right now if it is really the young girls are just not interested, or if it's that they are still not the trickle down effect hasn't hit them yet, where they're not maybe connecting to a player. Young boys have Messi and Ronaldo and Mbappe to look up to. And I think it takes sometimes just one player to really ignite a generation. Alex Morgan might have been that for a lot of people. Mia Hamm was that for me. So I think that's, again, going back to this project with SALT, I think that's why highlighting certain players is so important, because sometimes it's easier to get behind one particular player than it is to get behind a whole team, because you can connect with that character and their story. And so I think that's why it's really important, because one athlete could change the whole sport, just like Caitlin Clark did this past year, as we saw.
Definitely. What are your thoughts also just on, I feel like some of it might be, this is kind of more your area of expertise, but marketing, and like a lack of marketing. I feel like, where you just said some of those top soccer players, the male players, they're plastered all over, social media, advertisements on TV. When you go into a sporting goods store, there's posters of them. Do you feel like there's a disconnect still, or maybe, I definitely don't feel like there's as much marketing towards some of those key, like Caitlin Clark, but, soccer, any sport, softball players, volleyball players. Do you agree, from what you see working in the media, or not?
I guess I can't speak too much on that, other than what I do know is, as an example, the Lionesses, the English women's national team, they were just in a huge spot for Pepsi, a lot of the top players. I think that these big brands are trying really hard to stay relevant. And so I am seeing more and more women's athletes, like AJ Wilson just released this amazing spot with Nike, which was a huge budget production for this ad and campaign. And I think it's happening more. And of course, you see Alex Morgan's and AJ Wilson and Caitlin Clark a lot. And we still are waiting to see more of the players that aren't, the very, very top of the food chain, which I think for men, there's a bit more, that there's more players that they choose from. And women, it tends to be, I think, players that already have a huge following that brands go to, which makes sense a lot of the time. But I think as we go, we're going to see a lot of changes, especially with NIL deals in the NCAA. And I think that there's still just so much room to grow into. We have we're still trying to figure it out, I think, in the world, and how to market and how to make this as profitable as possible.
Sure, yeah, I agree, and I think that that's the kind of the disconnect. If they could link those two together, that draws the younger female athletes towards that individual, then that will lead them to wanting to watch the games, wanting to watch their teams, and all those kind of things. So, Kelly, one last question, and we'll get you out of here. Kind of along those same lines, you went from being a female athlete, you said earlier, growing up watching Mia Hamm, and you were lucky enough to play in college, and now as a successful filmmaker and a film director, as a female, what advice do you have to younger girls out there, regardless of any sport, of what advice do you have to them for becoming a professional and successful female one day when they grow up?
I have been thinking about this question, and I read this study. I don't know if you've read this, so tell me if you have. But there's this study that the Harvard Business Review did, and they studied they studied men and they studied women when it comes to job applications specifically. And this study found that 100 women did not apply to the jobs unless they had 100% of the credentials that were required for the job that were listed. But men applied if they only had 60%.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I started, and so I started really thinking about this. And I think what I would really want to implore younger people to do is to not be afraid to not know something, to believe in themselves, to find out the information that they don't yet know, and to not be afraid to ask, and to not be afraid to surround themselves with people that can help them get bigger and fill up more space, and step away from environments that aren't doing that for you. So don't be afraid to get into the game and really go for it. Don't be afraid to run as hard as you can, and to kick as hard as you can, and swing the bat as hard as you can. Just go out there and apply for the job. I don't think we always have to take things so seriously. I think we can also just go for it and try it. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay. It didn't work out.
That's terrific. I love that piece of advice. It kind of figured out along the way is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I think just believing in your ability to figure out what you don't know is going to be so important.
Terrific advice. Thank you very much, Kelly. And again, her new release, What We Carry, sponsored by Salt Athletic, a short film, has just been released today at the time of this recording. So make sure you check that out on her website. We'll make sure to put links down below for all of her great films she's made. Make sure you follow her on Instagram and social media. Again, just very appreciative of you taking the time. I know it's a big day for you, so we're really happy to have you on here with us, and love what you've done so far. And as a parent and as a coach of females, I just want to sincerely thank you for all that you've done, not just for our interview tonight, but for being such a successful, confident woman out there, and such a big advocate, and using film in the way, kind of in an artistic, meaningful, powerful way that you do to advocate for women's sports. So thank you very much again, Kelly McKay.
Thank you so much.